I'm Jerika. I use she, her.
Leap! I'm Leap! I'm Leap, and I use he, him.
Hi, I'm Shell, and I'm the Drunk Phytologist, and I use she, her.
So lovely to have you here.
Hi!
Woo!
I'm really excited to talk to you today, but we will leave our lovely listeners in suspense as we all dive headfirst into the darkest dungeon.
This is Insight Check, by the way, as well. Welcome to Insight Check.
Sometimes we do a podcast and answer questions.
The best podcast.
And this is one of those times. Whoa.
Oh, wow.
Jeez. Okay.
Hey, that's what I heard from the last episode, so...
You know what?
Gotta be
It's
branded.
working.
Yeah,
oh my goodness.
Well.
Jay, your buildup of yourself and those around us has filtered into the ears of people who admire us, who we believed were listening out of politeness, but positive reviews have at least come back from one person. I'm going to call that a win.
Yeah, I am your official social media fangirl, so, you know.
Yes. So let's talk about dungeon crawls.
They're a thing we do.
They're a thing we do. And why don't I start with this? Because I am looking at Twitter right now, and the official Dungeons and Dragons Twitter handle, Wizards Under Thing D&D, has Under Thing. Listen,
That's
okay?
a thing from the Patrick Rothfuss books. Okay.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Full disclosure, never read them.
Yeah, well.
I know I need to. I know.
I'm not saying anything.
I know I need to.
I just gasped dramatically.
And the guilt from my body.
Read them to find out what the under thing is, anyway.
Well,
There you go.
hashtag what's the under thing. But what we are doing is trying to speak right now, and I'm going to try and continue to speak. And Dungeons and Dragons Twitter, what it says is that they've just announced their next live stream event at hashtag D&D Live 2019, and it is called The Descent.
And there's an amazing, possibly paladin / maybe warforged
Angel woman
lady, wrecking some people, and I'm super excited about that.
Getting that paladin smite.
Yeah.
There's some serious new feelings, or I don't know. There are feelings that are definitely arising.
Not new.
I have
Old feelings.
Old feelings. Who knows, man? They're feelings. I know that. And
A dark feeling in this dark descent.
imagine
if you would.
a dark feeling. This sounds like a bad adolescence infomercial at this point in time. That's where I'm getting. Anyways,
So are you going to the Descent event? Leap?
I wish I was. But what is cool is that there are some really neat streams that have already announced that they're going to be there. I'm not going to name all of them, but I know for sure that Girl Guts Glory has announced that they're going to be there because they just said a little thing and then they attached this. There was a couple when I was scrolling down. And for our good listeners who want to put it on their calendars right now, it is from May 17th to 19th. And I know that the last one was just such a cool community event that whatever capacity you can view it in, there's just neat stuff. I believe we described it as the Reese Peanut Butter Cups of Dungeons and Dragons. You were getting your one stream into the other stream and your Matt Mercer into the something else. And it was just a really cool event. So I assume that this is going to be equally as cool.
Yeah. And it'll be really interesting to see what groups debut at this event, because Rivals of Waterdeep debuted at previous one.
Oh, yeah.
So it'll be
really
interesting to see who's new. Who's new? Oh, yes, quite.
That one got me. I wasn't expecting.
No one ever expects the high-pitched Jerika voice.
Oh, goodness. Goodness gracious.
Late in the evening, just around supper time.
It's all good.
And
it's a Friday. It's been a long ass week,
It's also a Friday.
listeners.
And
Oh,
it
yeah.
has been
Long week, too.
a long week. So yeah, you're lucky you're getting a podcast. No, I'm just kidding.
What's your dungeon crawl? You have one. I believe.
I do have a dungeon crawl.
All right, hit it.
So this kind of goes with our theme that we're talking about later, but I have been made aware that there is an effort to codify an ASL dictionary. ASL is American Sign Language, so that's a manual language that you use your hands for. There is an effort to codify an ASL dictionary of D&D related terms that don't have like well-known or any sort of signs. If you're interested in getting into that effort, if you're familiar with ASL, let me know. I'm at level 15 Druid, and I can get you in touch with the people who are organizing that. The point of that is so that ASL is available to more people in the D&D community, and perhaps we'll get higher numbers of interpreting. Perhaps we'll get players and DMs who are signing, but it's really important to have a sort of a universal vocabulary. So, we're all signing the same combination of signs, so we know what we're talking about. So yeah, hit me up if you are affiliated with ASL and would like to help make a D&D happen for everyone.
That's just really cool. Mm-hmm. I hope it happens because It's
things like, if you think about all the races and the classes, like there's no specific sign for like Dragonborn.
Totally. Right? And like
no
spell names
for like rogue. Well, there might be a sign for rogue, but like there's no sign for wizard. No, there's a sign for wizard.
Tiefling, right? Like
tiefling,
there's
sure.
Tiefling, yeah.
So, because like you don't encounter tieflings like in your day-to-day life. So like,
I wish we did though.
I agree with you.
Like,
so these aren't words that are necessarily floating around. Everyone's can just bring to mind. Oh, like horn person. Who knows? I don't know what the sign combinations are off the top of my head, but
yep, I'm still in that like teenage new feelings thing, and horn person had a whole other space in my brain.
You're feeling a lot of feelings today,
A lot of feelings. I can't tell if they're new or old, but they're there, man. They're there.
Maybe they're both new and old.
And I think this is especially important for sort of the ASL sign, just because spelling is so slow. And
right.
Totally.
A lot
Dragonborn. Like, that would take me forever.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of the self-consciousness that happens with differently abled people is being slower than everybody else, right? And it's like, I'm making everyone wait on me, And so they're less likely to contribute as much if they feel like they're going to be either annoying people or slowing down the pace or those sorts of things, So, yeah, I'm really excited about this, definitely.
Is there something that you saw this week in D&D or tabletop gaming news that you would like to share with the group, Cheryl?
Well, the thing is, I listen to a lot of D&D because I work a lot of hours. But I don't know if I'm allowed to gush about my home game. Am I allowed to
gush it? No.
Oh, yeah.
We gush about our home games.
Okay.
All the time.
So my last session that I had with my players was just my most favorite thing ever. So my home game is made up of me, and my players are my husband, my younger brother, his wife, my older brother, and my best friend. And it is the most hilarious, silly thing on the planet. But my older brother couldn't make our session, so instead, I had sort of a plot thing that had been sort of in the village that was kind of like a joke of their like home base. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to turn this into a little adventure. And I said, but you all, instead of playing your characters, get to play as your pets.
Oh, yes.
And so
You are literally talking my language right now.
Yep. So what I had them do, and it was a very happy accident because when we started playing, and so I'm sorry, I tell a lot of stories, but when we had started playing, I had played in college, and my younger brother, and so did my husband. And then my older brother was like, hey, you guys have talked about this forever. And could I play sometime? And I'm like, I'm the worst sister ever. How have I never thought of this? And so I invited him to play, and I talked my sister-in-law into doing it because she had never done like RPGs. And I wanted to get her to, interact more. So I gave her a fairy dragon as a pet. Now, of course, everyone else wants pets now. And so we have a whole family of fairy dragons that follow them around and interact with them. And I may or may not have thrown some kobolds in there that worship the oldest one as a god and follow them about. And so they went on this crazy adventure where vegetables that had been animated had intruded into the base and were stealing paper and ink and books. And I just watched my brother, you hear a noise, come into the kitchen, and he's playing his fairy dragon, which is this baby girl, and sees this turnip. And he goes, and so I fly down and I pick up the turnip, and I'm like, what do you know and who sent you? And so a 27-year-old man is playing a fairy dragon, interrogating a turnip and dressing it down. And it's like the happiest moment of my life.
Welcome to D&D.
Yes, welcome to D&D, everybody.
I love this pastime. It's great. It's just, it makes me so happy that I didn't think being an adult could be this fun sometimes.
Right?
And I love it. That's incredible. That's so good.
Well, and it's especially because we were all really close, but now that we kind of live all apart, it's sort of the one thing that we still get to do together every week or every other week, and just sort of catch up and stuff and be silly. And, it's definitely the highlight of my week for sure. So there, I've gushed enough.
I love it. What days do you guys play on? What's your D&D day? I always find this interesting.
So we tried to do Friday nights, but a lot of time it ends up being Sunday afternoon, just sort of depending on where we have to move it and what people's work schedules are. But usually that works pretty good and stuff. And it's sort of amazing just to see how different it was from the very beginning of everyone playing. Just because my younger brother and my husband have been playing forever. And so they take to it right away. But my husband's more a quieter person, and he was wanting to get the other people to talk more and interact more. So, and he usually plays the strong brooding type anyway, with a mysterious past. And so, he had suggested, after they had gone through this dungeon or this one base or whatever, to try to blow it up. And everyone went for it. And I'm like, this is a horrible idea. And so they managed to, barely escape. And then everyone's yelling at him, why would you say that we would blow this place up? That was such a bad idea. And he goes, okay, I am smart. But my character, he's not smart. He goes, you could have stopped me at any time, but you let me get away with it. Now they don't trust him at all, and it's great.
Awesome.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it so much.
So let's get to the heat of the meat. Oh boy.
Oh, wow.
Oh, let's stop for a minute. The heat of the meat. Don't know why there's heat in the meat.
Heat 165 Fahrenheit.
Oh my God, right. You can actually sing. This is so much better. Why was I sort of singing when I should have just let you actually sing, Shell?
Sorry. I wasn't trying to steal your metaphorical spotlight, Leap.
You deserve it, though. Oh, God. Oh, my goodness. So, heat of the meat. Let's get into this.
Let's meet the meat. Shall we have been made aware that you are a DM, you DM, and you have made you've been very thoughtful about how you approach this DMing situation because you have differently abled people in your game. And I wanted to talk about what changes you have made and what's working and what's not working. Can you tell us a little bit, you don't have to be very specific, about who your players are and how this all started?
I will say, accessibility's always been, really important to me. We can only for personal reasons, and we can get into it if you really want. But my younger brother's a bit hard of hearing. And so I already thought it's really important especially if we're over voice chat and we're not in person and he can't necessarily read my lips. So I always have the webcam on, because making sure to enunciate very, very clearly, as well as knowing what your consonants are, especially certain things like T's and D's and M's and N's and B's and V's. You have to be very cognizant of that. Most of the time, it's okay. And he has an easier time with me because I have a deeper voice for a woman. Mm-hmm. But he has lost most of his higher range hearing. So sometimes he'll have trouble hearing one of our other players. And so sometimes we'll have to repeat some things or whatever. But that's okay, because my best friend, she's blind. And so we met in grad school. She's working on her PhD right now as well, and actually is supposed to defend similar time I am.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And she's a linguist. So,
is she a cunning linguist?
Oh my
I
goodness.
would say so.
Oh my goodness.
Good.
And I had
Feeling.
Leaf is feeling feelings again.
Feelings again. Oh.
Ooh.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, and I think it was really important to me just because I had been telling her about I'm a huge Penny Arcade, Acking, C-Team fan, but I'm the way back before times. Yeah, it's another story. And so I had been telling her about it and telling her about the silly adventures and stuff we were having. And we would have game nights at my house every once in a while. And it would only be she'd hang out and be happy and just want to visit, but we could only play trivia games, or those sorts of things. And, when we started our PhD, which was a while ago, she could still perceive light. Now that's completely gone too. And so when I asked her, I was like, hey, do you want to play? I have never seen anybody so excited in my whole life. But then immediately she's like, well, I can't. I'm going to be a problem, or I don't have this stuff. And I'm like, all you need is your imagination. I will take care of the rest.
It's absolutely correct.
We sat down at my kitchen table, and it was very interesting to me because she is also never role played any sort of, TTRPG or anything. And everybody else, when I'd started this campaign, just because my older brother, my sister-in-law hadn't played before, I just gave them sort of pre-rolled characters, and I'm let them flavor how you want. And so I was sitting there and I was like, okay, well, we have these options. And immediately my friend was like, hey, you told me that there's these magic people that can do stuff with nature. They're druids, right? And I'm like, yeah. She goes, I want to be one of those. And
I like
where
this,
could I be?
this person
Already.
already.
This person already.
And she's like, and could it be something with water? Because we go swimming and stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, totally. We could be a coast druid. Okay. I'm like, all right. So that'd be circle. I'm like, so we've got circle of the land. She's like, okay, cool. And coast, and what powers do I get? And I'm like, well, I get this and this and this. And I'm like, okay, well, now we have to pick your race. And she's like, well, what does that mean? And I'm like, well, remember how I told you that, my older brother Phil's he's a dwarf. It's like, oh yeah, well, he's a dwarf. And then and she knows all the names of everybody in our campaign, so it's the wizard Annalise, she's a wizard. She's a high elf and stuff. And she's like, oh, elf could be cool. I'm like, well, there's different kinds of elves. And she's like, what? Tell me more, you know? And so she is...
affinity to this. Elves with an affinity to that. Elves who are just really haughty and don't want anything to do with you.
Do with anybody. Right. So she is a Circle of the Land Coast Sea Elf Druid.
Very cool.
Oh my god, I'm in love. This is wonderful.
Yeah, so in her very first, session, turned into a saltwater crocodile.
I love it.
Murderates an ogre and scares the living crap out of everybody. And now my older brother's like, Druids next campaign. Why aren't we all Druids?
Oh my god.
This is the question. This is the question I ask everybody. Why aren't we all Druids?
I think we are. We just, to varying degrees, accept it.
Yep.
I know,
Rogues.
but I said, I'm
Sneaky
like,
Druids.
But I go, well, and I've nicknamed him because he's sort of a battle cleric that plays like a barbarian, but I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, but then you'd have to maybe give up your hammer. Nah, you could keep your hammer.
Yeah. Barbarians, angry druids, wizards, book druids. This is
everyone's druid.
Cleric, health druid.
Yeah.
Warlock, emo druid. It's all. Yeah.
So it sounds like maybe you didn't start her in on level 1. Can you tell us what level that
right.
You started her with?
I did start her on 4 just so she was at the same level as everybody else because she'd sort of joined the campaign later. And it's because she was sort of really busy teaching at the time. And and she kind of rubbed it in my brother's face. It's like, hey, I got that at level 4. Suckers. Yeah, so I had initially done that, but I sort of worked her into the adventure because I was actually running Lost Mine.
Lost Mines of Phandelver.
That's right.
It's Phandelver-tastic.
Yes. And
what does that even mean?
So a lot of it I took, we'll say a lot of autistic license for different things just to sort of make it fun. But I will say...
Because Lost Mine of Phandelver is the worst. I'm just kidding.
Oh, it is a lot of fun, but,
make it more fun.
Yes, make it more fun. There are no fairy dragons stealing people's stuff in Lost Mines of Phandelver, but there are now.
But there should be, right?
There should be.
There should always be.
Right. And I also, and this was a little bit of an homage, and this is specifically for my younger brother, I've had NPCs, which were our characters from years ago, from our first campaigns, show up in town. And, everyone else is like, why are you freaking out over there? And he's just like, oh my gosh. He's so excited.
So you mentioned, all you really need is your imagination to come to a table, especially if, your friends are bringing paper and pencil and dice and things like that.
Right. And so that is a little different when you are not sighted. So what I had to do at first, I sort of made her character sheet and filled it out. And I also would type up everything because she has a interactive reader on her computer.
Gotcha.
Cool.
So is this text to speech?
Yes.
Gotcha.
And so that can work, but it is, a bit slow. But she knows all of her spells. She knows kind of, what they do and stuff. She's a linguist, so she, of course, says she's horrible at math, but the thing is I don't make her, so I let her roll, but I don't make her memorize all her modifiers because nobody else has to, right?
Right,
Everyone else has their sheet in front of them. So it may be a little bit more paperwork for you. It may make stuff run a smidge slower. So commonly what I will do, especially because I was silly and gave everyone pets, is I make them play either as their pets or their pets have the same initiative as they do. Yeah. And so it makes it a little bit easier. Dice were a problem for a little while. We had found some... using her sort of Echo Dot, had you found some online sort of dice roller. But it, was kind of crappy because all it ever rolled was 5 and 8. And we had tried some other ones or it wouldn't respond to her voice necessarily. And so we were doing that. And at first, I didn't really realize it because I had given her physical dice if she came over to my house. But the problem is with dice is even if they're very tactile and she can tell the difference between a D20, a D8, a D10, a D6, the numbers are flat.
Right.
So you
or they're
Like
engraved,
indented.
but
Indented.
they're filled with like color, so one could see them.
Yeah, exactly. So it's very, very minor. So it's very hard to feel what the shapes are. And so she would have to roll, but then I would have to read it for her. And I could tell she wasn't doing as much stuff because she would be really into role playing, but then would get, nervous when anything that she had to do to roll. But she still wanted to do it.
Yeah.
So I did end up going through. So dots.com had partnered up with a place called Shapeways, and they have a design for Braille dice. And it's a whole set. They're 3D printed. And so I picked out, and so this was her birthday present from me within the last couple weeks. I had picked out blue ones to go for her, blue sea elf druid.
Yeah.
And I gave those to her, and she was just so ecstatic. And
that's awesome.
it has made,
I love it so much.
especially because they're designed that each side, there is, on each face, there is one side which has sort of nubbins on it. And
Notches,
then
right?
Like little notches, right.
Yeah.
And that's how you know that one's the bottom. And they're bigger than normal
cool.
dice. And
I'm
also,
learning things because I printed for myself a D20 in Braille. And I was like, there's one side that's
Yep, that's the
that's
one
got
to
some
tell
notches
you.
in it. I
Right.
bet that's important.
Yep, that's the
So
one to
now
tell
I know
you.
which way it needs to go.
Yeah, which way it's
That's
supposed
incredible.
to face. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it also is a bit heftier so that if you do roll it, it's not going to flip when you try to grab it. It's sort of going to stay where it's at.
Totally.
It was, so she just had them for our last section with the, criminal vegetables. And it was like night and day. Like she just stopped worrying and started playing,
Because now she has ownership of the roles, and
Right.
she tells you.
Yes,
and you
exactly.
don't have to tell her. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and so I usually don't, I can tell if she wants to know, specifically what the numbers are, I'll just add the modifier and be like, that's enough, and you're going first and stuff. Because also, language is important.
Mm-hmm.
And so, at least for her, and we've talked about this, several times, is you don't realize how much of our language is based off of being sighted. And, for example, I'll see you later. Let me look at that. Right?
Right. Yeah, totally.
She doesn't mind, if someone says that, because she will even say that too, because she says it makes people less uncomfortable. This was even something we were talking about and that she had noticed. So she'd recently gotten prosthetics, which are shields that go over her eyes because her eyes are degenerating, so that her eyes look more normal. And people will forget that she's blind if she wears those.
Oh, wow.
But if she doesn't, I notice people won't look at her. Right?
Yeah.
And she will try to turn towards a person, right? And I mean, she's one of the best birders I know because we go on walks all the time. She's like, oh yeah, there's the red-bellied woodpecker or whatever. And I'm like, where? And she's like, over there. And it's like some thicket, and I'm
That's
like,
awesome.
all right, if you say so. But so because of that, she said that it's different for her as being someone who lost her sight because she knows what I mean when I say something's blue or something's green,
Yeah, right.
Right.
or the different colors. Versus, but I still try to be a lot more tactile about things. A good rule of thumb is don't be a rules lawyer about distance because it doesn't really mean much. And also, no maps. No maps.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize how important that was because initially I've played in several different campaigns, and we've gone from everywhere from our little dry erase map to pieces of paper to, extensive models, you know, to who knows whoever's DMing. But I always liked, you know, Jerry Holkin's C-Team sort of theater of the mind. So I had run it that way even before she joined our group. And they're trying to clean out, you know, the lost mine of Phandelver. And my husband...
No, not that
That one, I know. And my...
I thought we lost it.
I know, and then they found it again, and it's full of zombies.
So maybe why we lost it in the first place.
Yes.
Spoilers.
And so this had happened. They were sort of finishing this up, and they were trying to figure out, like, okay, well, where have we been? What have we still got to do? You know, blah, blah, blah. And my husband was trying to be helpful, right? And he's like, oh, he found a map, and he put it up in our chat, and he had colored in, you know, where they had been and where they hadn't gone. And so then everyone's discussing. And as soon as the map came out, my friend stopped talking. She just sat there and waited for everyone else to decide what was going on. And she had ideas like, oh, I think we should go this way or whatever. And then just immediately just went into the background. And it's just like, well, you know, and she didn't get mad. She didn't say anything, but it hurt me, you know, because it was so immediate and nobody else really noticed, you know?
Totally.
And so then I'm like, after this, we're not having another map again, you know?
So I have a question then. Is that like, because there's some things that as a DM, you just take note of and you're just like, okay, well, that's not going to work, so we're never going to do it again. Or was that like a conversation that you had with the table? Like, is that something that you're like, okay, guys, look, we're not just going to do maps anymore. Not everyone at the table. It's not accessible to everyone at the table. And so it's just not something that we're doing. Or is that just, or did you just make that mental note and just didn't have them a part of your games moving forward?
Well, we haven't quite finished like that part of the adventure, but okay. I mentioned it to my husband, and, you know, and I think my younger brother noticed, but he's a little more intuitive, you know, on that, because he has had like some struggles and stuff growing up. And so he was sort of like, oh, well, I noticed and I think he may have saw my face and was like, hey, what do you want to do? Right. And just sort of, you know, kept going and stuff. And she's like, oh, well, I think we should probably go this way. And it's like, okay. And then everyone put the map away, you know? Yeah. But that may be something unique to our family. I'm not sure.
Right.
That may be a conversation you have to have. I will say, when I was talking about distances, it's a little bit easier instead of being like, oh, well, it's 20 feet or it's 30 feet. It's more like, well, they're like just out of reach, you know, or they're like way across the cavern, you know, or, you know, you can hear them breathing, right? Or you can smell the sweat, you know, or you can smell the dust or the blood, or you can feel the breath on the back of your neck. You want to try and use words that make it more tactile and using the other senses that you have. Because it's very easy to be like, oh yeah, there's this dead dude, you know, over there, and he's gross. 35 feet away, you can measure because you're smart like that, you know?
To be honest, with like, that makes an absolute ton of sense. And as someone who tries to describe things like as another DM, I really like your emphasis on the tactile nature of language, because someone in your game it's necessary, right? For their enjoyment. It's also just rad, right? Like, it's also just like a really, it's a richer way. I think it makes the game better for everyone. And to be honest, for me, theater of the mind, distance is always a pain in the ass, right? Like, I mean, it's either like, can I hit it or can't you hit it? Yeah. You can hit it, right? Like, it shouldn't be,
am I within enough range to get some more information, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Totally.
And so
it's all about how close is it, and what do I get out of it, kind of thing.
And
yeah.
I always try to sort of make a little bit more like dramatic tension where even if like they're going to miss, I don't just say you miss, right? I say it's like, oh, well, you jumped up and you swung and you're like, and then you tripped and fell. You know, there was this bucket and clang. And so like right now, my older brother's character is carrying around a door because he felt like it. And I'm like, all right, you get to keep this door. And then and he's like, oh, I'm going to run over there. And I'm like, you can't make it, dude. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, because you're carrying that big ass door. That's why. And he's like, oh, man, I'm slower. He goes, yeah, but that thing's shooting fire. I don't care. And here it comes. It's like the biggest, like, you know, giant paladin shield you've ever seen. I'm just like, wow, this is so jank, you know? And so, but because of that, I've noticed that my blind player, she'll notice some of those like little details a little bit more just because she's listening very closely, right?
Right.
Yes.
Because everybody else is, you know, maybe looking at the sheet or they're thinking about what else they're going to do. And so, you know, I'm like, well, there's this, you know, flaming skull and they put this fireball in the front of there. And it's like, I have create water, right? And I'm like, yeah. She goes, well, I rain that thing out. And and it's like, and I run into the room. She goes, I know to my left, there's a door.
Yep.
With a dwarf behind it.
Aha.
And I go, you are correct.
That's cool, man. I love it.
You mentioned when we were speaking about this earlier that sometimes she'll ask you to if she can see something. And for you, that means what?
So when she wants to see something, that means she wants to touch it, right? And so if we're together and she's like hanging out at my house or whatever, and she's like, oh, well, can I see that? I hand it to her, right? And so when she like meets people, it's like she will only ever, you know, most of the time it's a person's hands. She knows exactly like, because she spent like enough time with us and stuff, but she will recognize my mom, my dad, my brother, and she will recognize them by whomever is shaking her hand, right?
Very cool.
That's so, yeah.
And so because of that, like she may spend a little bit more time, you know, but that's how she distinguishes people. And
Gotcha.
So any sort of, as I said, like a lot of this we do sort of on a webcam or voice chat, which is like perfect for her. And so even though, you know, we were talking about, it's like, oh, well, the camera doesn't work. And she's like, yeah, well, who cares? You know, it doesn't matter anyway. Because she even had an interview and it was pretty hilarious because she had, it was supposed to be like this sort of webcam interview. And she had called me and is like, okay, I've cleaned the apartment. I've put on my makeup. How does it look? How's the lighting? You know? And we're like moving around trying to figure it out. And then later it's like, well, they called her. They're like, well, we're having a problem. We can't see you, but we can hear you. And she's like, man, I cleaned the apartment for nothing, you know? And then...
yeah, she did, 3 times as much work as perhaps a sighted person would have done. Yeah.
Right. And then, well, and that's a little bit of a misnomer too. On that, I have found it interesting where some people will say, you know, oh, well, are her parents nearby? And I'm like, no, they live hundreds of miles away. It's like, oh, well, she's your roommate. And I go, no, she lives alone. You know, and she made me cookies the other day. And her apartment is cleaner than my house is. You know, because you just adjust, you know. Yeah. And so that I think is one of her biggest pet peeves where it's the, you know, it's like, well, I'm a single blind woman, therefore I must live with my parents for the rest of my life and have them take care of me.
Yes, indeed.
And so she's like, no, I'm getting a PhD. I'm going to be professor. I speak 4 languages. Everyone else can suck it. And she told me before. So she does have an assistant. His name is Daniel. He is a yellow lab.
Oh.
And he is the best.
Daniel.
And he is afraid of my cats for some reason, but I don't know why.
So, can I ask you a favor?
Mm-hmm.
If I name a common D&D item, can you give me some non-visual descriptions of it. Tactile descriptions. What's common, Leap?
Well, we could do weapons. So, okay, how about this? How would you describe a set of potions that your players kind of trip onto, right?
So what I would probably say is you hear a clink and you find a leather sort of worn bag. It's torn. There's a little bit of chafing and it's definitely worse for wear, but when you manage to get the sort of corroded button open and you open it up, there are these, you can hear the tinkling of glass. And you pick out one and it's a vial and it's about the size of an apple and it's round. And when you pop open the cork, it's got a sort of acidic sort of sulfur smell. And you pull out the next one and it's thin, almost like a test tube, and it's a cylinder. And you pop that one open and it smells like grapes. The third one you find and it's sort of this odd geometric shape and it's got a really wide mouth at the top and the cork's kind of like stuck and crumbles a little bit. But when you open it up, it smells like a lightning strike, like ozone.
Nice. Yeah.
And then and so it would be something like that.
Yeah, and even as a sighted person, I very much enjoyed those descriptions.
Holy
right?
God, I loved that.
These techniques,
I freaking loved that.
Are gonna, they're gonna be useful whoever's playing your game.
Right. Well, it might be obvious that I'm a big reader.
Excellent.
I read a lot, and so I get a lot of these ideas, but I listen to a lot of audiobooks. And so some of the best ones are the ones where it's not necessarily that you've changed your voices. Is changing the speed at which you speak, changing the timbre, changing maybe a little bit of the accent. But it doesn't have to be, crazy town. You don't have to be very good at voices. But it does help if you have a non-sighted player to mix up your voices some, because then it's easier for them to distinguish different people. Like for my players, it's like, okay, all of them have different voices, and different things, and that's easy and fine. But then, of course, I'm the DM and I'm playing everybody else. So then I've got to figure out, I'll have different NPCs, and the one major NPC that used to be one of my characters, of course, she sounds like me, right? But then her best friend, who's this Minotaur blacksmith, I just lower my voice and I talk kind of slowly. And I'm just sort of lackadaisical and relaxed, versus if I'm going to be a nervous character, right? And so I had those kobolds that were, worshiping one of their pets and is like, "Oh, mistress, we made you and so on. We're so sorry and we failed you. Have mercy on us. We're not worthy.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can just be a little bit of that. I'm not trying to do a French accent or anything crazy like that, because I'm not even good at those anyway. It's Gleef! Right?
Oh no. We're in that game again.
Oh, nein. I do the German accent much better, but, even if you don't do that, as I said, just speed can be a little bit different, right? Or just timbre, just raising and lowering, and just so that it's a little bit easier to know kind of what's going on. And so sometimes my younger brother's like, you're getting awfully dramatic, because I also make sure if somebody does do kind of something awesome that I do sound effects, but they're not professional soundbite sound effects. They're just me goofing off, right? So it's you get I'm like, all right, you get him and you stab his arm, and it's, it's and so just goofy stuff like that. And I'll also like if she's at the table with me, and I will make, if there's something big, right, coming, I will hit the table, right? I will vibrate things, and so
cool.
You can feel the weight of it, and even if I'm like, just to give it a sort of, weight to it, a little bit more as sort of a sense of scale.
Oh, heck yeah.
See, these are all really
good advice anyway, right?
Yeah, no, but it's true. It's like, in education, there's a lot of differentiating instructional practices that you put into your classroom,
right,
that they talk about, that it's like good for all, necessary for some, right? And what you've described are ways to make your Dungeons and Dragons game richer with the very important task of making it accessible to someone, right? Like, because I know that if I was a player at that game, that is just a way more interesting game now than if it wasn't there, which is cool for me. But like, what's the bigger, more important thing is that all of a sudden a non-sighted person can play a game, right? And so I think that these are just really useful strategies for anyone to use, because then all of a sudden anyone's game can become accessible to someone who is vision impaired, right?
Right. Well, and I think a lot of the time, and especially sort of in our modern day culture, we're always in a hurry. And we're always trying to be connected all the time. And just taking a little bit of extra time, so it's like, yeah, you may only get through like one combat, but it's going to be so awesome that you don't even care, So I try to...
What an amazing approach. Sorry. My mindset for a very long time has been like, ooh, let's get to the next plot point. But actually, it's something like mindful D&D, or some might say slow D&D, where it's like, let's take this encounter that we're experiencing right now and make it the best encounter anyone's ever played.
Right. And I mean, I think it might be a little bit more natural. Like my younger brother, my husband, and I, we're all performers. We're all singers. And even my sister-in-law is really into it because she's a kindergarten teacher. And so I will, because she's in education, I'll bounce ideas off of her, of different things we could try or do or whatever that were fun, as well as, and maybe it's just a personal thing, just because of my profession, I'm always on the go and I'm always working. And this is the one point where I can just sort of slow down. So it's like, yeah, I have sort of like a little goal where I'm like, oh, well, we'll maybe get through this or whatever, or we won't, and we'll steal a door and and we'll go over and get really fascinated on this one thing for like no reason. It's like, okay, fine, who cares, And I think it's kind of hilarious because I had given them this random like encounter with sturges. I had like rolled it up, and these people have fought like, dragons and zombies and flaming skulls and banshees and all this other stuff. And the thing they hate the most is these sturges. They have like 5 hit points, but everybody is like, oh, well, they're like a giant mosquito. And it's because a couple of them had sucked up blood. And I'm like, oh yeah, well, you throw your throwing axe and you hit it and it explodes like a water balloon. And everyone's like, ah! And so now right? And I always try to make it like, if a little bit dramatic on like, if it's a hit where it's like, oh, you killed the dude, yay, right? But did you like kind of kill the dude, like, or did you like destroy the dude, right? So what really got my older brother into it is he's like, oh, well, this is cool, and like combat, and he's like, hey, I want to like line this up and stuff, and I hit the goblin, and I'm like, well, he rolled a natural 1. So he trips and falls over this stump, and you line it up, and you just take that skull out like a melon. And he's just like, ah.
Have you ever asked him how he kills whatever it is?
Oh, the Matt Mercer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And so like I've done that too. And so like at first at the beginning, I had described it, sort of in my way because they weren't really sure what to do. As I said, like a couple of us had played, but everyone else didn't. But now I just let them tell me how it's going to go. Right. And I always ask them to paint me a word picture, And so now it's so natural. They don't even think about it. Like my sister-in-law has been nicknamed the John Woo Wizard by Postability. And it's because she doesn't know any better. It's like, oh, I want to be a wizard. It's like, great. And it's like 1 second she'll be like, oh, well, I'm really squishy. And then the next second she goes, I run in there and I and I cast. They're fighting this flaming skull. So she's like, and it's like, where is it? It's like, well, it's 30 feet up in the air. Misty Step is 30 feet. I teleport behind it. I'm like, in the air? In the air. Yes. And it's like,
incredible.
And I'm like, okay. And I shock and grasp it. And I'm like, great, you hit it. It's like, flies it across the room. I go, now make a dex saving throw. And I go, why? Because you're falling.
Yeah, exactly.
And busted her ass. But then she's like, it was worth it. I have 2 hit points, but I don't care.
I love it.
Then she found a ring of Featherfall, and now that's her thing she does. Like every opportunity.
That's awesome.
Oh, that's so good, though.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
You also mentioned, and I don't want us to miss this, that sometimes you have to repeat yourself, or and you actually take time, before each person's turn to do a little recap.
Right.
So that everyone kind of knows what's going on. And I think that's a great idea and might, help me as well in my gameplay.
As I said, it's a little bit back to we're always sort of in the hurry, right? Where it's like, well, I gotta get this done and we gotta get this immunity done and that's like, we gotta get this milestone. And it's like, but why? Like, why do we have to do that? Like, we set a bunch of goals that are all just made up, really.
Yeah.
And so they're all arbitrary. And because of that, so what I'll do is if somebody, is like, oh, well, I know what I'm going to do. And they're like, well, I'll do this, then maybe I won't recap. But everybody there knows, if they're not sure about something, they'll say, okay, where is everybody? And I'll describe, okay, they're here, they're here, they're here, they're here. It's like, there's this guy, this guy, this guy, and it's like, it got a little confusing, like one of our encounters, because I had like a bunch of enemies, but so it took a little bit longer, but we figured it out, because that was another thing on everybody in my game. It's just sort of casual fun time. So, we goof off and screw up and have inside jokes, and tangents and stuff like that. And so even if it just takes a little longer, it's like, oh, well, I just look, I'm like, well, maybe, this person's got to go do this. So maybe we'll just wrap up here for now. Like, this is good enough for a stopping point, but I'll ask everybody. So I'll usually get to a point, even if it's like halfway of where I want to be. And I'd be like, okay, do you guys want to stop here? Do you want to play more? Because if we play more, then we'll go do this, this, and this. But I'll warn them ahead of time, depending on what you choose wisely, It shows poorly. And because like there was a couple times where it's now we're in this big old fight and it's like, oh, well, and I'm like, well, technically this is when we were supposed to stop. And everyone's like, no, we've got to kill the thing, And so
totally,
we've got to get the loot. They're a bunch of greedy gusses too. It's terrible.
Yeah.
What I really like about what you're saying is that, like, just to kind of tie back to Jerika's new term of slow D&D.
I read it online. I'll be perfectly,
I wanted to give you that credit. I wanted to give you.
I do like the mindful D&D. I think.
Yes.
I do like that term a lot.
But like when the point of it is to get around the table and just really enjoy the experience that you're creating with people. And if that's your number one focus, then like, why the hell not just like really live in that imaginary moment as opposed to just being like, okay, and we're just going to skip this so that we can go to that. And I mean, like, some people love that game, but I just like that idea of mindful D&D is very refreshing to me, and I love it.
Yeah, well, and I even had it where I had an idea where I'd sort of just put it out there, and then, like, even my brothers and stuff mentioned, they're like, oh, well, there's like so many things we could do. And I'm like, yeah, I want it to be that way. I want you guys to be able to do whatever you want. And they're like, well, what if you made this other stuff? And I'm like, doesn't matter. If you don't want to do that, we won't do it. Or I'll work it in later. I'm like, it's fine. You know? Yeah. I just put that magic rabbit and, you know, criminal vegetables as a joke, and then the pets ended up having that adventure. Now everyone's trying not to metagame because they're like, I know things, but I don't know things. Now I'm confused.
Yes, indeed. Well, we have had a delightful discussion with you. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
When I started playing, this was way, like, at the same time when Ack Inc. had started, but especially in the podcast, it was very casual, it was very fun. And it was before Critical Role. It was before all the streams. It was before all these different games, which are wonderful and amazing. But don't try to make your home game that, you know, like, and it's like, if I don't fit that standard, then we're doing it wrong. You know, there is no right or wrong way to play D&D. You know, you just do what works for you. And as long as everyone's having fun, who cares?
Indeed. Very sage advice. Where can the people find you if they want to find you?
Well, I have a website, drunkphytologist.wordpress.com. I'm on Twitter at DrunkPhyto, where I talk about D&D and science, and I write the Daily Dose blog. It's kind of on a little bit of a hiatus right now, because I'm trying to finish my PhD, and it was either that or sleep, and I'm sorry, everyone, I chose sleep.
Yeah, a long rest. Super important.
Indeed.
Even a short rest I will settle for right now.
Oh, man, you are preaching to the parent choir right now.
I know, right? Well, that's what the dissertation is. It is a baby. I've just been in labor for 6 freaking years.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, my God.
All right, ugh. And on that note, we'll leave our listeners with lovely thoughts about that. Thank you all for joining us for this episode of Insight Check. As per usual, we would love to thank all the listeners, and also all the listeners who leave comments and ratings. It could be you. You could be our new favorite comment leaver. Leave it wherever you want. So, yes, so we love everyone, and also specifically Amy T. Falcone and Vince Vept for helping us.
Yeah.
Amy T. Falcone for the faces and Vince Vept for the musics. That's it. Answering your cues from our collective A's, this
was
Inside Check.
Yay!
Yeah!
A round of applause.
Jerika,
yes,
you had a... Oh my God, I'm so sorry for people who had earphones in at that point in time.
Jay will fix it so it doesn't kill people.
I kind of hope he has earphones in when he first hears it. We'll hear about it.
Jay, 7 minutes in, just take the headphones off and throw them in the garbage.
Throw them in the garbage.
If you're hearing this, it's too late. It's already happened, man.
It's true. I have to go back in time and apologize profusely. Anyway.
Jerika, you Oh my god. So sorry for people who had earphones in at that point in time. So sorry. If you're hearing this too late, so sorry. It's already happened, man. I kind of hope Jerika, he has earphones in when he first hears it at that point in time. We'll hear about it. So sorry.